Hey, all, welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's Thursday, February 3rd. So glad to have you along today. I'm really excited about this conversation. We're going to be talking with Jane Turner about whistleblowers. I have so many thoughts about this. Maybe you do too, or maybe you've never thought about a whistleblower in your life and you don't know what people who blow the whistle inside their companies, the government, industry are doing. So it's an important conversation. I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it is 9 below zero this morning, friends. 9 below. You're really living it up. And producer Dan is along, as he likes to say, lurking somewhere in the background. Hey, Dan.
Hey.
How are things there in South Bend?
You know, it's great. We got ourselves a snow day 2 days in a row. We got like 16 inches of snow, something like that. So it's like kids are loving it.
This is for real snow, not just we had one of those cold days that turned.
Yeah, last week we had a cold day. Just school was canceled because it was so cold. This time it's snow.
It's the real deal.
Yep.
Well, hang in there, cute little South Bend, Indiana, in the middle of your snow day. And those kids, does that mean your wife, who's a school teacher, is also away?
Yep, everyone's home. Yeah.
And you're out in the frozen barn running the podcast. Hey, Jane Turner, nice to have you with us.
Hey, Doug, nice to be here with you. I've heard a lot of things about you. Delighted to be on your show.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have you here. Vote Common Good cares a lot about the common good, and so do whistleblowers. So, Jane, before we get into all that important stuff, where are you coming from today? Where do you find yourself?
I'm in the Midwest, and I also am suffering from the cold.
Well, we are joined by people all over the country and being, persecuted by the cold, because people down in Texas and Arkansas, they are all feeling it at the highest of levels. Apparently FedEx wants to keep me up to date on how their business is going, so they sent a notice today saying because of the sleet in Memphis and a snowstorm somewhere else, if you got a package coming today, it's not coming. We're sorry about that. We'll get it to you later. So everybody's feeling a bit of this. Snuggle up to your headphones wherever you are, friends, and join us here on this conversation. And if you're in the chat, of course, on Facebook or Twitch or YouTube or Twitter or any of those places, or if you're on a YouTube channel, especially, let us know that you're here and share some comments with us. All right, Jane, you have a storied history and past as a whistleblower. I said to producer Dan, in a text today, I said, Jane Turner is a whistleblower legend. Now, I don't know if you consider yourself that way, but if there were legends of whistleblowers, if there was some kind of a hall of fame, I think you would be in it. You're a former FBI whistleblower. Can you tell us who are whistleblowers? What is this whole thing? People whistleblowing?
Well, the common definition, Doug, of a whistleblower is someone who speaks truth to power. And it is not an easy thing to do. And there are not a lot of people who do it. So it's a very unique area with very unique people. And I'm glad you're shining a light on them, because so many are ostracized, marginalized, slandered, libeled. It's a tough role to take on.
And whistleblowers are people in really any industry. I mean, they're often most popularly known of when they interact with the government, because the government's the largest, institution that we all interact with. But they really do come from all industries and all businesses. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. I was over in London liaisoning with Whistleblower UK and had an opportunity to talk to a Wells Fargo whistleblower. I'm currently getting the interview of a Tesla whistleblower. And there's a large component of people who are very interested in Tesla and believe that there's something going on there. So yes, banking, law enforcement, industry, whistleblowers can come from anywhere. I've interviewed whistleblowers in Iceland, all over. Fishing industry.
And you actually run a podcast with all of 2021. You were interviewing with a whistleblower of the week. So if people are more interested in hearing some of those stories, they're fascinating and are worth listening to.
Yes, thank you. My main role is writing Whistleblower of the Week for Whistleblower Network News. the first online whistleblower media, which is international and brings attention of whistleblowers, whistleblower news, things that are going on in terms of Congress, the Senate, political. So it's time. It's time to bring this to light, all these, very important messages and stories.
How long has there been a whistleblower network news? People around kind of
Sure.
organizing and giving voice to whistleblowers. How long has that been happening?
Relatively new, a year and a half, 2 years,
Oh,
and it has really, really grown. And especially with hosting these whistleblower stories, there's a significant interest in showing what the politics are. People are beginning to see how whistleblowers are marginalized and how they are isolated, ostracized. That is good to show.
well, I do want to talk about the more high-profile whistleblower cases that have come to mind. But before we do that, you actually were the center of a high-profile whistleblower case. You're a former FBI agent, and
Yes.
maybe I only knew about it because I'm in Minneapolis, and the thing that you were raising awareness around had to do with Indian communities in North Dakota, and I think maybe spanned into Minnesota. But I remember years ago, now that I've read your biography, I'm like, oh, you're the person that was involved in that. That sharing more broadly how FBI agents were not protecting children on
Correct.
Indian reservations, especially when people on Indian reservations needed the FBI to investigate child sex crimes and abductions and disappeared women, that because of the way that the structures work with an Indian reservation being an independent nation, it becomes a
Correct.
federal case when someone's affected or taken off of the reservations. And that was your area. So it's so good to meet you. That was whatever 25 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah,
That was
25,
way back.
roughly.
Can you tell us that story and what was going on there and what you saw and what it meant for you to start raising the alarm bells or blowing the whistle and drawing public attention to this?
Sure, be glad to. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do it. Since I was very small, I've always wanted to be an FBI agent. I did not have law enforcement in the family, but that was just something I really, really, really wanted to do.
Huh.
And in fact, I approached the head of the FBI in Rapid City, South Dakota, when I was just a youngster and said, I want to be an FBI agent. How do I do that? And he said, you can't. And I said, why not? And he said, because you're a girl. So I was just stunned. But this is, of course, during the time of Hoover. And I kept that dream and I worked toward it. At that time,
Wow.
you needed 3 years of management experience so to get into the FBI. So I was at Father Don Murray's Sky Ranch for Boys as a counselor after I got out of college. And I saw abuses of sex abuse there done by Father Don Murray. And I said to myself, if this, I will never allow this to happen on my watch when I can do something.
Wow.
And I've kept that promise. And I went on to work corrections in Nevada, and then I came in to the Bureau. I was very, very successful. My first office was Seattle, and I became a profiler there, one of the first profilers out in the field. Loved it, worked white collar, political corruption, loved everything. Then
Wow.
they decided to reward me by sending me to New York City, which
Wow.
was not the place I wanted to go. But I worked
Oh,
organized
really?
crime there. Yes, I worked profiling cases, the Robert Chambers Central Park Preppy case, the bomber case in New York. I worked all of those as a profiler, and
You,
I
you
just
you mean the
gained
bomber
more.
case of the World Trade Center towers that became the precursor
No,
to the 9/11?
no, this was somebody who was putting bombs in abortion clinics.
Oh,
And we determined that what was motivating him was, of course, this desire to end abortion. So we got a higher clergy person to come out publicly and ask him to contact us, and he did. So profiling was my specialty. I loved doing it. Robert Chambers in the Central Park Preppy, we told the prosecutors in New York what his motive was for killing Jennifer Levin. It was just, I just loved it. And as an FBI agent, I was just a natural. I shot, I ran, I was just perfect. It was just perfect. And
Shane cracked me up.
yeah, yeah, I loved it, every minute of it. Worked organized crime, the Genovese family, went undercover. Uh, it was just going super. And I decided to take a posting in Minot, North Dakota. Why not Minot?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was close to where I was born, Rapid City. And I figured I could get home more often. Well, here comes this big expert from New York into Minot, North Dakota. And I had 14 sheriffs, 15,000 square miles of nothing,
Hmm.
2 Indian reservations, Minot Air Force Base. And I set about making changes and really starting some new programs with child abuse. Brought up equipment for looking into the injuries done to children. Really started making a difference. Before I got there, it was not high on the list at all. But
How many FBI agents are in a office like mine in Minot, North Dakota?
well, that's known as a resident agency.
Okay,
And so it is out of Minneapolis. North and South Dakota operate out of Minneapolis.
I see.
It
Okay,
might not. There were two. So as you go into these little RAs, like up in
yeah,
North Dakota, there was two in Minot and two in Grand Forks, and um,
yeah.
so you just have minimal. And we often pride ourselves in doing our cases with chewing gum and rubber bands. We
Okay,
go out into the field, Indian, Native American Indian reservations. They can be vast track lands of nothing. So sometimes I couldn't even get highway patrol, which we had to go through because our antennas didn't reach down to Minneapolis. Very remote, very difficult. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Um, but what happened was, so here I am, super agent, running around North Dakota. I was doing drug cases out of my area.
hmm
Um, and I was just, eating everything. I loved it. Well, what happened was I had, not every agent can be a super agent, can be even a good agent. It's like law enforcement everywhere. You have some bad apples. And I had a agent who was opening informants that were unaware they were being opened. It's like somebody saying here in Minneapolis, Doug Poppet would make a great informant. So without your knowledge, they open you up, put it under your name, and just put information in there regarding podcasting, media, things like that.
I see.
You're not supposed to do that. That is called a tombstone informant. Means they're really not there.
Okay,
So anyhow, he was doing that because he didn't have the ability to get informants.
hmm.
He just didn't have the social skills or ability to do that. So he invented them. He took names of people and he was putting information under their
I
names.
see.
Yeah, because that's what you're rated on. I, on the other hand, had informants coming over the transom. They were coming out in the windows because I really like people, like to deal with them. And as an agent, I was very compassionate in terms of dealing with people.
Hmm.
I didn't have any need to come across as John Wayne. So the other thing was he really, really hated working sex abuse cases. And so what he did is he closed them out as car accidents. Mhm.
What?
True. Yeah, true
Huh?
story. So we had this young boy who was admitted to the hospital in Minot, and I had trained a doctor there how to do these child abuse cases because at this time I'm an expert. I'm considered an expert in these cases. And I go out to training across the country and train people how to investigate as an FBI person. So here I thought it would not be any problem bringing these deficiencies to light. But this doctor got a hold of me and said that a young boy had been admitted with severe anal injuries. And the young agent in Minot, had said it was from a car accident. And she said it was so horrible and so graphic, these injuries. It traumatized her team, her medical team.
Wow.
She had taken pictures, and she asked why one case was done off my reservation. I had there was Fort Berthold, which I took care of, and then there was Turtle Mountain. And this boy came from Turtle Mountain, and I had Fort Berthold. So she asked me, why did this case go through on Turtle Mountain that was on Fort Berthold that was just as bad, and this one on Turtle Mountain did not? So I said I would look into it, and I went and confronted him and asked him, because I was a senior resident agent, which means I'm in allegedly control of the RA.
Okay.
So I went and asked him. I said, why did you say that this was a car accident? The doctor is saying these injuries are sexual in nature, abuse of this child. And he said, looked me right in the eye and said, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Wow. Now, you're trained when you come in through Quantico, Virginia, where we receive our training, that, you're special. You're a special agent. Well, some people take that to heart, and probably they shouldn't. He was not a doctor. And I told him that. I said, you're not a doctor. And he just, that's when I began to find out that my successes kind of rankled some of the guys. They really did. I was kind of a superstar. I was going around the United States teaching. I was doing these huge cases up there. The United States attorney up there was asking for me on a specific case out of Bismarck, which was the internet killer case. And so it engendered a lot of jealousy and dislike. So I was stunned that this gentleman, this agent, felt that he could overrule the doctor. So what happened was, I took the case. It had already been closed. I called the assistant United States attorney there in North Dakota, and I said, this is sex abuse. And he was like, oh my God, we've closed it. And I said, well, could we reopen it? Well, normally you don't do that. But I had worked with him very closely, and he reopened it. I went up there. It was the father. It was a horrific case. The boy was still with the father, who had abused him terribly. These injuries would affect him his whole life physically. And that got him sent to prison. Well, what I did was I went down to Minneapolis and talked to the SAC, which is the special agent in charge. And I said, we have a problem. We have this young agent up there who thinks he knows more than the doctor. We have screwed up this case. The FBI has screwed up this case. We need to apologize. We need to fix it and proceed onward. And he looked at me and he said, you have your own kid to worry about.
Wow.
That's kind of what I thought. I thought, wow. And I, of course, put all those thoughts out there. Is this the kind of FBI we want? Is this the kind of FBI the public deserves? I really got on a soapbox. And, of course, he kicked me out of his office. So I got on the plane, flew back to Minot, and wrote it up and sent it to FBI HQ. And the next thing I knew, I just bought a house up there. The next thing I knew, I had orders to report to Minneapolis. Yeah. I had been up there in Minot for 14, 15 years, kind of had this dynasty and had really done a lot of good work. And they pulled me out in a matter of days. You cannot turn down orders.
I see.
We're kind of paramilitary.
Yeah.
But he had told me that I was coming down here to Minneapolis because they wanted me to take over the crimes against children. Yeah, in Minneapolis for these 3 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go down. And I did. And of course, I didn't even have a desk. No one talked to me. I was froze out, isolated, marginalized. And they were working on a fitness for duty. Fitness for duty in the FBI. If you get sent, they can take your gun away. Knowing that they had done this before, I had seen a psychiatrist up in Minot, North Dakota, and he had written up this whole report saying, she's normal. There's the test all show there is no pathology. And in fact, he had stated in the comments at the end, it said, she's a take charge person, and this might engender some problems with men who don't like to take orders from a woman. And of course, he nailed it right on the head. So I presented that to the SAC, totally ignored it. They sent me to Chicago. And they do this with whistleblowers. It's not uncommon. They did it with Fred Whitehurst, the FBI lab whistleblower. They've done it to almost every FBI whistleblower.
So when you say whistleblower, the whistleblowing action here was you sending the report from your conversation with the agent in North Dakota and with the supervisor in Minneapolis. You sent that report internally inside of the FBI. That was correct. A whistleblower action in and of itself. That is report correct. That you sent. Okay, that's helpful because for some people, I think they think that whistleblowing means that you've turned it over to the public. So this is at least how I've tended to think about it. You couldn't get what you needed internally, and so you went outside the channels, often into the public. But you're saying that's not really how one should understand whistleblowing. Whistleblowing sometimes can be internal, inside the system, doing precisely what you thought you were supposed to do?
Absolutely correct. And this is why whistleblower stories are published, is to let whistleblowers know there is a system set up. Back when I did it, there was not.
I see.
But we're a paramilitary organization, don't forget. So I was already knowledgeable about taking it up the chain of command in the FBI.
Because you're one of those take charge kinds of people. So you had figured it out. So you're on the airplane flying back to Minot, whatever it is, 45-minute flight. Yes, and are you starting to think at this moment? Are you thinking, okay, here's what I'm going to need to do. I'm going to need to write up a report?
Oh, no. I kept thinking somebody's going to come to their senses because you cannot have children abused on Indian reservations.
Right.
You cannot have this done. I also knew he sent a veiled threat when he said, you have your own kid to worry about. I understood right off the bat that was a veiled threat. But I wasn't
speaking
sure
of your
what
child?
kind of
Was he speaking about your own personal child? Like, don't worry about the Indian kids.
You got one of your own to worry about. Wow.
Did he ever admit to saying that when you had to report this stuff up? Was it like, that's not what I said, that's not what was intended? Is that how this all goes when this happens?
Oh, they got on the stand in Minneapolis during the court trial and lied. I was shocked because as an FBI agent, you always know you cannot lie on the stand. If you lie on the stand, your career is over. You can never testify. You recently had this sheriff who was drunk driving, right?
Yeah.
At the scene,
a sheriff here in Minnesota. Yeah.
Yes, and he lied at the scene. Automatically, his law enforcement career is over. He cannot testify ever in a trial. Because he will always be impeached as a liar. So, when they lied on the stand, the ASAC, when they lied on the stand, you could have knocked me out of that trial chair with a feather.
And that trial, just to give people the time frame, this was all happening in the late 1990s, early 2000s?
Yes. Between 98 and 2000.
Yeah, so that 2-year period. But the trial was 15 years later. Is that right, in 2015?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. Back then, they didn't have protection for whistleblowers like they do now.
Okay.
So my attorney, which was Cohn and Colapinto out of Washington, D.C., had to...
it's a great name for a law firm, Cohn and Colapinto.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. I wanted to do a coffee shop called Cohn and Cappuccino in honor of them because they saved my bacon. They did.
Right.
They had close ties with Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley stepped in to the Minneapolis office and said, "You will not fire this woman." That's what
Really?
saved me. Oh God,
Did the senators from Minnesota at the time not step in and say you won't fire this woman?
absolutely worthless. And even today, I have gone to the senators and have asked them to intercede for whistleblowers, to come to National Whistleblower Day. I've done everything I can to implore, impeach, uh, ask them to help us, even just come to the National Whistleblower Day and speak, which lots of senators do. Never. And
This
we
is
have
Senator Amy
two.
Klobuchar and Tina
Uh,
Smith. That's
you
our
bet.
current two senators, and
You
you've
bet.
approached both their offices and asked them
Yes,
to
I have.
participate.
Yeah,
They've said
more
no.
than once. More than once. And you have two nationally known whistleblowers here in
In
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, who's that? Who
Yeah,
do we have here?
myself and Colleen Raleigh.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So, well, let's
but I'll
stir up a
tell you
little.
why. I'll
Let's
tell
stir
you
up a
why.
little
They don't.
pressure on our two fabulous
Oh,
senators
sure.
about this.
Well, I'll
I'd,
tell
I'd
you
love
why.
I'd love to be involved in that with you. I think they would,
Oh,
and
bless
and
your
in the
heart.
end, they would appreciate the encouragement as well. I'm sure, both being
Okay.
people of highest standards.
Oh,
Jane,
oh,
let me ask you this. A lot of us know
sure,
about whistleblowers from the more famous whistleblower claims that come
sure.
from uh, the WikiLeaks leak,
Yes,
the person in the military. I've now forgotten her name. Who's been
Reality
in?
winner.
Thank you, Dan. Reality
yes,
winner.
yes. I've talked to her.
Okay, and those cases are always kind of mixed up in this when I hear these stories about them, especially the WikiLeaks stuff. Like, okay, there
Yes,
may be something that you needed to raise awareness, but there was a better way to do it. Is normally the
yes,
argument, and some of the things that you made public should not have been, and there has to be a distinction between these things. So, how do you, as somebody who advocates for whistleblowers, respond to this? Are these kinds of national stories where people are taking government secrets and making them available to the public an outlier that's really different than other whistleblowing? Because I just think to your average person like some of us, this all gets muddled together into the same spaces. Do you think about that slightly differently?
yes. That's an excellent question, Doug. You are running down a road that is complicated and interesting. WikiLeaks, if you notice, we of course write uh, a ton of information about whistleblowers. We do their back end stories. We've written about Reality Winner. I've talked to Reality Winner. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. There are some areas that are uh, we don't run to. WikiLeaks is one.
Okay.
Now, when I went over to England, huge following over in England for WikiLeaks.
Mm-hmm.
They are, and they asked me, why don't you support WikiLeaks? Well, you get into issues of national security.
Okay.
And if it appears that another operative from another country that is not friendly with us gets involved, we do not see that as a good kind of whistleblowing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you can have these foreign countries that are enemies of the United States that manipulate people, organizations, and we tend to stay away from that.
I see. So you make a distinction there. And I think the other distinction that's been helpful in this conversation to me is that not all whistleblowers are being public about their claims. Oftentimes, they're doing it internally in their own systems or organizations.
You will never hear from them. Take, for example, a lot of
Wow.
banks, financial area, they go to SEC and Security and Exchange Commission, and they'll file something, and all you'll hear is a reward went out of $22 million, and you'll never know the name. But it's totally different with the government. The government has the ability to squish you like a bug, whereas there are really strong protection for financial whistleblowers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
interesting. Yeah,
It's pretty clear in our country how we tend to use our
yeah,
structures to prioritize our the things that matter most. When when someone
bingo, Doug.
is a whistleblower inside the government, so now it feels like there's also this next level of distinction that's happening in my brain, which is industry or businesses, and then the government. Are they radically different spaces when you're a whistleblower inside the
Yes,
government versus? Yeah, talk about that.
yes, radically different. Here's where the government falls down. If I had not had Senator Grassley intercede for me in Minneapolis, not my own senators, because they're afraid of the FBI. There's no two ways about it. Senator Grassley's been wrestling with the FBI for years. He's known as patron saint of whistleblowers. He was not
I didn't
afraid.
know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, he's known
interesting.
as the patron saint of whistleblowers. He's not afraid of the FBI. He does not deal with them on a personal level or is tied up with them in another. Take, for an example, there might be an organization in Minneapolis that has the FBI sponsoring it, that also has Amy Klobuchar involved, and they work together.
I see.
Um, and so I had to go to a jury trial under different than whistleblowing. I went under EEO. You cannot get a jury trial for whistleblowing in the government.
And EEO is equal employment opportunity or something? Is
Yes,
that what EEO is? Okay.
you yes, you can get it under EEO. You
Huh.
cannot get it with the government, a jury trial. So this is what we're really fighting for, is jury trials for whistleblowers. Because if you can get that fair judgment, whistleblowers will win every time. Right now, there's a very, very controlled, strict way in the government that a whistleblower has to go up this road. It's very time sensitive, it's very convoluted, it's really, really difficult. If you do not have a whistleblower attorney who is helping you, you will fail. Take, for an example, I've dealt with whistleblowers who were one day late in their filings. They lost. I've had whistleblowers who contacted the wrong internal person. They lost. So the path for whistleblowing with the government is really treacherous, and many have lost out.
And maybe you
Joe
can
Carson,
share with it, because I would
sure.
imagine for you, I mean, it was so helpful for you to describe that you wanted to be an FBI agent from the time you were a
Oh,
child. You were
oh
motivated
yeah,
around protecting children. You end up going to places where you can do this. You think highly of it. You're good at it. Your identity is
good
tied
at
up in it.
it.
You're
That's right.
advocating for the FBI. Like you're a
Oh,
G
yeah.
woman at this moment,
Oh,
right? And
oh, I
for you
I
to
went out.
start to then say, hey, the FBI is not the good guy here. That mental shift for you must have been difficult. And I'd imagine for other whistleblowers it is too, which would probably cause some sort of timer to start running of when they can raise issues. And someone just coming to grips with the fact that they now have to see the agency they work for is not the good guy. What was that the case for you? Did it, and how do you view the FBI now? Have you reconciled your relationship with the FBI? Do you feel like, wow, it's not what I dreamed that it was when I, was back in South Dakota wanting to be an FBI agent? Or where do you find yourself now?
Well, that's a really, really good question, and you've touched upon a very sensitive spot. I was so traumatized, Doug, from the treatment I received, and it was awful. If I had not had a background, I had got a major from New York in forensic psychology. If I had gone to Chicago and not had the training I had with psychology, I couldn't have passed it, because the FBI wrote up all this stuff saying that I had done this, and it was all untrue. But my test came out all excellent, saying I was normal. They couldn't figure out the dissonance between what they were being told by the FBI and what the test results were. And that's what FBI whistleblowers ran into.
You mean they
I'll
started
give,
slandering you and saying like she's unstable or
oh,
she's
I'll give you
she's
an example. I'll give you an example real quick. In Seattle, like I said, I loved what I did, and I was lucky enough to be involved in some major cases. I was at the arrest of Christopher Boyce. He was a spy for Russia, and we caught him on the island there, and I was there at the arrest with the U.S. Marshals. It was their case. When they wrote to Chicago, so here's the kicker. I got a letter from the United States, from the Attorney General of the United States, was in my personnel file saying, thank you for your service, and oh, this was a great case, and it was an atta girl. So when I went to Chicago, they had in there that I said I was at the arrest of Christopher Boyce, and it was not true. So the psychiatrist asked me, well, they say you weren't there. And I said, well, of course I was there. I have a letter from the United States attorney. And he thinks that I'm nuts and he said to me what everybody says, why would they lie? I said, ask them. It's because I'm a whistleblower. In fact, on my discharge papers, when they tried to terminate me, it said I embarrassed the Bureau. And that was the bottom line. So yes.
And you embarrassed the Bureau how? In that case, in this situation, how were they saying you were embarrassing the Bureau? What did you do that was?
It came out in public.
You let that out? Like you called a reporter and said, hey, I've sent this letter and this is what's gone on, and this now needs to move outside of the internal. Like I blew the whistle internally and it didn't work. Now I'm blowing the whistle outside the building.
Well, not to make things complicated for you, Doug, because this is a complicated
we like complicated.
Story.
Yeah, we like complicated. Life is complicated.
Oh, man, is this complicated. So I fought it back, and they brought me back into the office, but I still they would not assign me any cases. Well, that's your lifeblood is cases as an agent. If you don't have any cases, they can grade you as unacceptable and fire you. I knew what they were doing. So I developed the biggest case in the office. Our SAC even went back and bragged about it to Washington. That case, which I developed and served a search warrant on by myself because they wouldn't give me any support in the office, was theft from ground zero.
I read about this. So at the same time, I see now. So now you're brought back to Minneapolis. They're icing you out. You can see what they're going to do is say that your performance reviews are declining because you're not producing, and you're not producing because they're not assigning you cases. So you can see how in the industry you're going to be ultimately terminated, and this is all going to go away. In the middle of this, you realize that a Minneapolis FBI crew has gone to ground zero to do what they should have been doing after September 11th. And they start bringing things back to Minneapolis from ground zero. And you find out about this. And is that because I only read little pieces that there were two things. There was the child abuse case, and then there was the theft from ground zero by Minneapolis FBI agents.
Correct. And that did it. I was working, here's the trap I got caught in. Because they would not give me any help on the case, I had to bring in U.S. Marshals to help me. And we did surveillances. The Marshals would fly in, believe this or not, from another state. They would fly in. It was Homeland Security at that time. They would fly in and help me do surveillances. They helped me track down all these witnesses. I developed informants. I mean, it was a huge case, huge.
And you're doing all this on the down low, like you're sneaking into the parking garage and making a cell phone call to having to get a U.S. Marshal and saying like, hey, come next Thursday, and then we'll court. Like that's what you're having to do to make this case happen.
Oh yeah.
Has anybody written up the screenplay of this? Is this movie material yet? Because I know some people that should probably turn this into a.
Oh, I'll tell you. When
Agent Jane movie.
Yes. Jane Wayne. So when I came back,
just Jane Turner will do it.
They assigned me a beater of a car. Usually when you're an FBI agent, the more seniority you have, the better car.
What car was it? Please tell. Did you remember the make and model or whatever the year?
Oh yeah, it was one of those Chevy pieces of crap that you roll up the window and the handle falls off. I can't remember what they called them, but they were awful. They just fell apart. So anyhow, when the marshals came in, they would rent a really nice car, and we would go driving around in that car. They had all the equipment. It was just sad. It was just sad. So I was out there doing all this stuff and developed this massive case, which I found out that the SAC went back and he was bragging about this huge case. And we were planning on indicting right on the anniversary of 9/11. But unfortunately, um, I found all this stuff in our office and I told the AUSA.
What's the AUFA?
No, AUSA, the Assistant United States Attorney.
Oh, AUSA.
That's yeah, that was out of Minneapolis, and they were. You have to have one to develop a case,
Okay.
and of course they had a heart attack. They just. How can you prosecute somebody?
Take me into that story. So you now realize you've got this stuff, and you have to walk over to the federal building, or you call ahead, or you.
Oh no,
you've got your stuff in a bag. Like how does it happen that you're now going to basically whistleblow to the attorney, assistant U.S. attorney, about your own FBI agents inside of an office where they're icing you out because you've already complained once? Like, you've got to be feeling the pressure at this point just through the roof.
It's terrible, Doug. I felt like I was in a vice because I wanted to stay an FBI agent more than anything in my life. I was so good at it. I mean, once you're an FBI agent, what can you do when you go out into the free world? I mean, this is all I ever wanted to be, and that's just what I was good at. So I really wanted to stay. But here's the problem. I was not working with other FBI agents. I was working with outside U.S. Marshals. They saw the stuff in the office because they were working with me.
Like what was it? What's the stuff that was in the office that they took? And
there was a globe. There was pieces of the aircraft. I mean, I was shocked. I've never removed anything. When I worked organized crime, there was money laying around in these organized crime houses, and I never took a cent because nothing was worth losing my career over. That's how special it was to me.
Did you confront the agents yourself? Did you say, like, hey, that globe is from?
No.
You just saw it and documented it in some way.
No. I asked the secretary where she got that, because I had done all the background on this stuff that was stolen from Ground Zero to charge the people up north who stole it all. And I knew how valuable these artifacts were. They're extremely valuable. And I asked her, where did you get that? And she said the evidence response team that was sent out from Minneapolis brought it to her. So I realized
she had a globe sitting on her desk in the FBI office.
Yeah.
So you're actually describing here a brazen level of attitude of the way the office or these agents are behaving. It's not just one person did one thing and there's a bad apple. You're now starting to describe a situation where it's all over the place and they're giving gifts to their secretaries right out in the open.
So I thought, if somebody would give it to a secretary, they're probably giving it to their wives, their mistresses, their husbands, their pastor. Who knows?
For sure. Yeah.
So I thought, we're in trouble here. You cannot remove things from crime scenes. I knew that because in the first bombing that happened in New York, it was a teeny piece of metal that convicted those people that they found. So not disturbing the crime scene is critically important. They had brought back
so you go to the U.S. attorney, you turn all this stuff in. Is it this point where they just flat out fire you?
No, well, close. So I'm working with these marshals. They saw the stuff in the office, and we were there after everybody left. That's when we worked together after everybody left for the day. And I told them about the globe because I was in a panic because I'd already blown the whistle once, and I really wanted to stay an agent. And they looked at me and they said, if this was one of our guys, we just couldn't let that happen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wow. So we were just getting set to indict, which we did eventually, the guy up north for stealing all this stuff from Ground Zero. We were just getting ready to go into grand jury, and I knew I had to do it. I had to. So I walked over to the United States Attorney's Office. The whole way I was thinking, oh, dear God, why are you putting me in this position? Seriously, God, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And I told the AUSA I was working with, and seriously, the blood drained from their face. And they got up and left the room. I knew something was bad. We were just set to go to grand jury, and it was like a couple days away. And they got up and left the room. And I sat there and sat there and sat there. And they came back and said, you can go back to your office. And the cover up started.
So even the U.S. attorney decided to cover it up?
Yep. They were involved. They got a hold of the SAC, and they said a major problem, a huge problem. How can they go forward with this case? And they already had an agent who, it was a mess. Let me just put it that way. It was a mess. So that is when I was told I had embarrassed the Bureau. My career was over. In fact, the SAC
So
looked me
someone
right in the
from somebody from the U.S. Attorney's Office went to your supervisor at the FBI and said,
Oh.
Look, Jane Turner has brought us this information. And so then they found out that you had been doing this other work and working on all these things.
Yes.
And then you were terminated.
And that was the end. And well, hold on. More to the story.
All right.
So I was told I embarrassed the Bureau, and they proceeded to give me hundreds of tapes from sex cases that they told me to review. And that's while they figured out how to get rid of me. They had me looking at all these sex tapes for child porn. And I just sat there. Nobody talked to me, not one soul, nobody. It was awful. It was awful. And in fact,
and your feeling is that giving you that material to look at was just a way to punish you. That's what they were doing. You're going to sit here and watch disgusting pornography until you're miserable.
And I had an agent who came up to my face, screamed in my face, and he was going to hit me. I could tell, and I didn't back down 1 inch. We were bumping chest.
What were they saying? Like they're saying you're ruining the FBI. You're a danger to it. Like the things that you felt they were doing to the FBI and hurting its credibility and damaging its work. They were saying you're the one, Jane, that's doing that.
Oh, definitely.
Is that right?
Yes. And I flew back to Washington. I met with FBI senior management. I asked them, is this the FBI we want? Is this the FBI the public deserves? Made an impassioned speech. And they terminated me because I embarrassed the Bureau. And that was on my termination papers.
So the only recourse you ultimately had was you had a trial in 2015 through the Equal Employment Opportunity Act.
Right.
And there they granted you compensation for being wrongly fired. Did it then come out that the FBI had behaved improperly, or has that never actually been adjudicated?
It's never come out. It's totally was sealed away. The story really hasn't come out in terms of their bad behavior, and they just wanted to move on. Get rid of this rogue. In fact, they said you've gone off the reservation. They didn't realize at the time that they said that I worked Indian country and how
that you'd actually worked on
a
reservation and tried to be on the reservation, and they moved you off the reservation.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
and
that's that bigoted language.
Yeah.
So Jane, their argument is, okay, we have a rogue employee who took things. We're not contesting that, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. Is that because this is what I think happens to a lot of whistleblowers. They I would imagine can't figure out, has this reached a level where it's more than one incident? Like when do just anybody who has any bad experience in a work environment doesn't know, should I say something or not say something? Like everybody worries about this stuff. you're just at a level where the consequences are higher for you and for the nation. Actually, is that right? Is that an accurate way to describe what was
Oh,
going on in your
oh,
head and their heads? And
oh, definitely. And after I was let go, which you ask how that affected me, it
yeah,
totally. Uh, I took several years to assemble all the pieces. It totally blew me apart.
oh, I'm so sorry.
My identity, yeah, my identity was absolutely crushed, smashed. That's everything I was an FBI agent, and it totally traumatized me because that's all I ever wanted to be. It took a long time to put all the pieces back together again, and I couldn't understand when I was doing the right thing. See, along that whole journey, Doug, I thought somebody would come and say, "Good job, faithful servant." I
Yeah.
really did. I thought when I went back to HQ, they would say, "Oh my God, is that what's going on in Minneapolis?" But instead, I found out they jumped on the bandwagon, mainly because of what the SAC here was telling them, because those SACs are kings of their kingdom. So
Mm.
he could say anything, and headquarters would have to believe it.
What
So
do you
he had
think the
just
motivation was for the U.S. Assistant Attorney to not be supportive of this? Like why? I mean, you must ask yourself that. You must have asked yourself that when you walked back to the office that day, and you probably ask yourself that now. How do you conclude it at all? Like what's motivating people to cover up and be silent about these things?
excellent question, and I'll tell you. You know, the FBI's reputation is everything to them. And when they said you embarrass the Bureau, when I was going through new agents training and when I was a counselor of new agents years later, what you were always told is never embarrass the Bureau. And that's a maxim that you
Hmm.
have to adhere to. Okay, the Assistant United States or the United States Attorney's Office and the FBI are tied together. We
Hmm.
bring cases to them, they prosecute. They depend on us, and we depend on them. That's how it works. They cannot be at odds with one another. I'll give you another example, which I ran into. We police the police. There are very few color of law violations. In my career, wrote up several. There's very few because we have to work with the police. If we are continually putting them in jail, would we ever get any kind of support from them? No. And this happened up in Minot when a police officer on the Minot, or I'm sorry, on the reservation. He was white. He took a Indian, Native American, and the Native American was drunk. He hauled him down the stairways with this kid's head going bump, 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 and broke his neck. He was taken to the hospital in Minot, and they misdiagnosed him as malingering. So they tried to force a hamburger down him to eat, and he choked to death. I wrote this up because this police officer at Fort Berthold was a bad egg, bad egg. And he had been accused prior of sexually abusing prisoners. So I thought, let's do this, man. And I wrote up this big report, got all the medical stuff, waited months and months, uh, wrote up how he broke this kid's neck, this Native American's neck, and he should not be a police officer. And months later, the Department of Justice came back and said, we decline any prosecution because it was the hospital that killed the Native American, not the police officer. You see this time and time again because we have to work so closely with law enforcement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, see, that didn't scare me. When I went out there, and this guy, okay, I'll tell you, he was the police chief. When,
Oh my
you
goodness.
know, oh yeah, that's who we depend on when we go out to the reservation. We have to have them to take us to where people are. They don't have addresses out there.
Yeah.
They refer to themselves as seeing eye dogs for the FBI, which I think is
Mm.
pretty funny. But at that point, I didn't care whether I had his support or not because he broke that kid's neck. And that was the right thing to do. So I wrote it all up, I sent it in, and I fully expected they'd get rid of him. Didn't happen.
Jane,
So
how
that's
common,
why,
as you've interviewed
very,
now all kinds of, because you do these weekly whistleblowers of the week, how
yeah.
often do you hear your same story in their minds where people say, I thought everyone around me would say, good for you. Thank you for raising this to our attention. And then only to
Oh,
be found out that, no, that's not the response. In fact, you are blamed for causing trouble by bringing it up. How common is that the story that people experience in the other whistleblower environments?
well, hold on to your hat because it's 100%. It's 100%.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Every
got to be the
single one.
disillusioning part, right?
Yeah. And I have not talked to every whistleblower in the world,
Of
but
course.
I have talked to close to 100. And I will continue talking to them because their stories need to be told. These stories have to get out there. But every single one said, all I was trying to do was make the organization better. All I was trying to do was make things better for the public. Um, I can't tell you. And they thought they'd bring it like the Tesla whistleblower. There's some stuff here that is shocking. They thought by bringing it to management, management would say, oh my God, we're endangering the public. Let's fix this. Didn't happen. 100% of whistleblowers I talked to thought by taking it to management, they'd say, the Wells Fargo guy, everyone I've talked to, everyone in the federal government, they would change it, they would make it better. They all thought that. And instead, hell rained down on their head, the whistleblower's
Wow.
head.
And
And
all of a sudden, then they end up alone, right there. I mean, they've been living with
oh,
this fear all along. I mean, just thinking the emotional state people must be in. Then they try to go into the
oh,
office, even maybe before they're terminated, and trying to make sense of it. Maybe their family is now saying, "Well, I told you. Do you think it was worth it?" Now you're,
yeah,
and then at some point, people must think, "I wish I hadn't done it." Or maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I am crazy and I don't even know. I would imagine the emotional pressure could make people even doubt their own confidence in the thing that they're whistleblowing about. Is that true?
absolutely true. Absolutely. You hit it right on the head because you can't understand why this fierce, when you're trying to do good, when you're trying to speak truth, why are you getting this reaction? In fact, when they were saying these things, I even thought maybe is there something wrong with me?
Right.
It was, yeah. So it's,
Like had
yes,
you not received that letter of notation from the who was it, the attorney
Attorney
general
General
saying that
of
you
the
had been
United States.
at that arrest, you may have said to yourself, was I actually at that at that arrest? Like
Well, yeah. In
yeah.
fact, it's in a book, Flight of the Falcon. It's in that book at the end of the book where I'm noted. I was working undercover, um, and I'm just thinking, did that happen? Yeah, because
Yeah.
you don't expect these people who you have given your life, your career to lie about you. It's stunning. It's really stunning. And
It
this
is.
is why, yeah, whistleblowers, when you first deal with them, sometimes can be speaking really fast. They're trying to get everything in. They're so traumatized. They come
Yeah.
across that way initially. It takes years to usually sort it out.
Yeah, and they normally have a very complex web of
Oh,
understanding, and they feel like I can't give you just one piece of this. I need to tell you the whole thing. And then people's eyes start to glaze over and they're like, I've lost track of what you're saying. And then they're like, now I think you don't believe me. So now I'm going to tell you more. I would imagine this is a cycle that you experience with whistleblowers as they try to come to grips with how they publicly talk about this very negative and life altering experience that's happened to them.
Doug, this sounds like you've been there. You seem to have insight that very few people have. You're absolutely correct. Have you blown the whistle on something?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
But these are, when you're in people work, and I've been a pastor for a long time, and so you just end up kind of watching the patterns of how people deal with difficult situations, right? So whether someone is whistleblowing in a business or finding out that their spouse has been unfaithful to them or has realized that their own faith is devolved. Like there's just a lot of things that have this same human experience, which is, I don't know what's happening now. If I tell the truth, as I understand it, the consequences are enormous. And I used to think there were consequences for lying. Now I think there's consequences for telling the truth. And that's a pickle people find themselves in.
Yes.
That is just incredibly difficult. And so I don't know where the phrase whistleblower comes from, but I would imagine there was somebody that like had a whistle around their neck, and when trouble was coming, they would blow a whistle. Is that where it comes from?
Well, they believe it's traced back to Victorian times. Nobody's really sure, but
Okay.
the bobbies on the street would blow the whistle. That's a common thought for it. There's a group that wants them, Serpico, who I've interviewed, wants it to be lamplighters. Some people have a problem with whistleblower. They'd rather have that title of lamplighters, which is bringing light.
Well, I like it. One of the reasons I'm bringing it up is because there's I don't know, whatever this metaphor is for telling the truth, whistleblowing kind of makes it seem like, oh, I see something, I'm now going to grab the whistle and blow it. Where the reality is, there's no whistle. People are like sitting at their desk or walking by or heard a conversation or had an experience, and now they're having to figure out, who do I talk to and where do I go? So there's something about whistleblowing that feels very quaint and straightforward, like pulling an alarm.
Yes.
But actually, these people are in a situation where they don't know what to do or who to go to. And everywhere they go, people aren't saying like, oh, thank you so much. People are saying, sit down, be quiet, go back. This conversation never happened. This is what they're hearing. So lamp lighting might even be a better, but I don't know. It's more like, you have to now find some wood and find a spark and then get something to start on fire and then have people blow it out and then have them throw it in a bucket of water and then relight it again. Like the pathway to doing this, as you've described it in your own story. And I imagine if you're an employee inside of a business and you're just like it might be scary to go to the government, but it's probably even just as scary to go to your boss or to a CEO of a corporation or to the, some watchdog group and try to explain yourself in all this when you're probably not even so sure of everything that that you want to be. So I guess here at the end I'm just kind of putting together the difficulty that I don't want whistleblowing to seem like it's a straightforward action. It's got to be an emotionally wrought.
And you've illuminated some of the real issues here. And I have to stress, Doug, these people are unique. They have a core of strength in them that is amazing. People like Joe Carson, who have hung in for how many years? Over 20 easily. I'm still fighting the Bureau because they still owe me money. They refuse to pay. That's their last dig. You know what I mean? So these people hang in for years. This is to them something so important, people knowing the truth, and it's so difficult. Like the MSPB with the government, which is supposed to adjudicate these cases, there is no board. There's been nobody nominated, so they're backed up. Like I said, they said it'd take 5 years even to clear out the cases now in front of them. So you really have to be a strong, moral, resolute individual to be a whistleblower. It is not for everybody.
Well, Jan, I sure hope we're not done with these conversations. And if you ever have another whistleblower that you've talked to and want to have on here, we'd love to do that with you. And we like to end our times when we have time. And if you do, looking at just some of the comments that people have made over the course of our hour and 6 minute conversation here. So we're going to put those up. And if you want to comment on all of them at
Sure.
the end, or one of them, or some of them. We'll sort of put them up. Darlene's just saying hello from Alberta, Canada. So hello, Darlene. Nice to have you along.
Hello.
Jim says that typical politicians only help when campaign contributions are involved. That came during the time we were talking about why people are involved.
That is right. That is right, Jim. Mm-hmm.
Kathy says healthcare is problematic for whistleblowers.
Yes.
What do you know what that might be referring to? What Kathy's getting at?
I've talked to and presented stories of healthcare whistleblowers. They're fired. Boom. They just get rid of them.
Wow.
The hospitals don't want to hear how their people are not getting the safety equipment. It's a real problem.
I've heard that's about COVID. David just sends a nice little encouragement. Says love the video. Thank you, David. Beverly is asking, why is Amy Klobuchar avoiding this? What's going on? Amy Klobuchar, former I think district attorney or U.S. attorney here,
Sure.
and somebody who maybe her past history is I stick with the FBI. I don't know.
What can you get from a whistleblower? Nothing but grief. What can she get from the FBI? A lot. There's the simple answer. What do I have to offer? Nothing but grief. Yeah. What does the FBI have to offer? They've already partnered with her on some things. So that's the story of life.
Jim chimes in when we were talking about when you said, that you're in a kind of a paramilitary environment and trying to figure out how to go work up the chain. It says the chain of command in the good old boy network will help the good old boys who are on that chain. And then Marjorie has a couple of them here. She says, cover up in the government, churches, law, workplace, etc., is much more prevalent than people want to believe, and we wonder why people believe in conspiracy theories. And I thought that was an interesting place to go. Whenever a conspiracy theory, and I tend not to buy into them, or big huge cover-ups, people are like, well, that's because you don't know what's going on. Is there something about people who have experienced what you've experienced where you're like, I find myself more willing to believe more cover-ups than I used to? Is that something you found to be typical?
Well, no, I'm not a conspiracy theory either. But when people are speaking the truth and authorities come out and call them liars, who are you going to believe? Mm-hmm. When truth is not acknowledged, this is where we're getting these conspiracies, because people do not know what to believe. They're being told one thing by whistleblowers and another thing by people in power.
Yeah. And I just think too about the trouble a lot of us were having after what I think was the disastrous election of Donald Trump, and how he was so dishonest and so many people in his world were being arrested by the FBI. And then he's out saying, well, the FBI are the ones that are dirty. And then you had a whole bunch of people like spending a lot of time, especially in 2017 and 18, singing all the praises of the FBI. Yeah. And some of us have had experiences with the FBI and their behavior that hasn't been very honorable. And you get this kind of black and whiteism, right? You don't want to be surrounded by liars on every side of the government and law enforcement. Right. And that's kind of what it felt like during that period of time was, oh my goodness.
And please, Doug, allow me to say that there are some wonderful people in the FBI. I worked with some of the best people. Oh my God, most wonderful people I ever, and I miss them. And they do great work. There's also some sociopaths and antisocials that work in the FBI.
Yeah.
It's just, that's how life goes.
I'd imagine that's true of a lot of whistleblowers where they say, and I love this company. These are the greatest people I've ever been with, but here's a problem. And I don't want to lose all of that for this. And Marjorie's going to have another comment here in a moment that I think really captures that. Mike goes on to say, good morning, Jane Turner. Thank you for your work. This conversation is long overdue, which I'm sure you agree with. I fully support whistleblowers because of the courage it takes to step up and speak out, especially those that have risked and sacrificed their freedom. The whistleblowers are often the unsung heroes who are necessary for truth to come out. We need to show gratitude for the courage of people like Daniel Ellsberg and Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden and Reality Winner. Now, there's this list, right? And in it is Edward Snowden. And I'm sure some people are like, I'm going to get all meatloaf about this. 2 out of 3 ain't bad here, but, I'm not going to go for that other one. That's a pretty common thing. And I'm sure you run into that,
yes,
in the sentiment at times. Okay, then Kathy goes on to say, because they're uneducated, I don't remember where that landed. I was trying to remember when it came, but there was some problem. And then here's Marjorie back again. I thought this was interesting. She says, a baby in my family was molested by an elder in the church. My family went through hell. We were called liars, snubbed, and accused of ruining the reputation of the church. The head pastor even wrote a letter to another church warning them not to let me join. The perpetrator finally confessed, and yet it changed nothing. Churches have long been a place, when you asked why I know about this stuff, or sort of people confronting their churches for bad behavior is one of the places that's so tough. Do you have much experience of whistleblowers inside of the religious sectors, whether that's Christianity or other religious traditions?
That is an area that really has not been explored, but I am looking for some, and particularly in your area.
Yeah.
We're
interested in it too.
Yeah, exactly. And I will certainly get them over to you when I find them. But if people want to find out what's going on in the whistleblowing world, look at National or Whistleblower Network News, and that carries all the news of the day. And you'll find these whistleblower stories. There's archives, and I think you'll really enjoy reading about some of these whistleblowers and their travels. And
well, it's a great website name, because if someone's like, what I want some whistleblower news. Oh, I go to whistleblowernews.org. So it's the very thing you're looking for. You don't have to be overly complicated. Whistleblowers news. Jane, I'm so sorry for all that you experienced. Thank you for your bravery, and not only 25 years ago and 10 years ago, but 10 minutes ago. So we really do appreciate it. And I hope we can stay in touch and keep these conversations happening.
We will, Doug. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. All right. Hey, Dan, anything from you?
Nope. Great show. Wow.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow. We're talking economics, but we're going to have a more classic economist on to tell us that view of things. So if you want to hear about common good economics, same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow. Thank you, Jane. See you soon.
Thank you.